Good evening. Oh, blimey, that's a bit loud. Can we turn that down a bit? That was a little too loud. Right, that's a little more like it. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. I'm Clive English, the chairman, and I'm happy to see you all here for this last meeting of the calendar year of this committee. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel for our multitudes of viewers. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? That's not to stop you doing it, but just so that we know if anyone is doing so. No, that's good. If the fire alarm sounds, as I haven't been notified of any fire alarm tests, we'll assume that it's an actual genuine alarm, so please stay seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Can I ask people if they have mobile phones to ensure that they're either off or on silent mode, and please use the microphones to speak if you can, and turn them off when you finish speaking. Right, moving on, item 1, apologies. Are there any apologies? I've got them from Councillors Hasty and Hinder. Have we had any from Councillor Clark or anyone else? No? Okay. Are there any substitute members? I don't see any. Right. Item 3, urgent updates. I have accepted an urgent update to item 14 as it relates to the committee's consideration of recommendations arising from the Environmental and Waste Crime Review. Is that agreed, members? Thank you. Visiting members, I see Councillor Garton. I assume you're here for the waste review, but...
Good evening. Yes, indeed, Mr. Chairman. Number 14, if there's any further questions, I will be available.
Thank you very much, Councillor Garton, and thanks for coming. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures? No. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Are there any disclosures of lobbying? No. Item 7, to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I am not aware of any exempt items this evening or likely exempt items, so I move that we take all items in public. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Item 8, minutes of the meeting of the 21st of November, pages 1 to 6. Are there any comments, first of all, on the accuracy of the minutes? Oh, so nice to have an uncontested set of minutes for a change. In that case, I move that the minutes be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Item 9, presentation of petitions. There are no petitions. Item 10, question and answer session for local residents. There are no questions from local residents. Item 11, question and answer session for members. There are no questions from members. Item 12, Cabinet Forward Plan, pages 7 to 23. This is quite a long section. Are there any items which the committee would like to conduct pre-decision scrutiny on in this rather long list? Yes, that was you, Martin. Councillor Round.
I just noticed that there's a number of conservation areas that are being examined again. There are conservation areas missing.
Sorry?
There are conservation areas actually missing on this various list of checkups, as it were. I know it's not for this committee to worry about, but I just think that surely by the look of it, we're doing about 60 or 70% of them. Why aren't we doing the others?
Could you give me an example?
Headcorn.
Sorry?
Headcorn. Headcorn's conservation area is not on this appraisal and management plan.
Right, what I would say on conservation areas, slightly outside our remit, but what I would say on the conservation areas is if you have a particular view that a programme should be brought forward, would you kindly make a representation to Anna Stevens and copy it to the chairman and vice chairman of both the Pied Pack and of the Planning Committee, please? And we will take it forward. Any other? Councillor Thompson.
Just a small typo on page 9. I believe Jeremy Fazalaro is the principal conservation, the principal conservation officer.
Oh, I see.
I'm sure he's a principled man as well, but it's the wrong one.
Okay, we'll amend the spelling.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well spotted. Any other comments on this report? Any particular issues you want to look at? No, I don't. I think we've probably got enough to be going on with, to be honest. So, in that case, are there any other comments that you want to make on the Cabinet Forward Plan? No, in that case, I move that the Cabinet Forward Plan be noted. Is that agreed? Committee Work Programme, pages 24 to 25. Are there any comments on this? Councillor Round, I know you have one.
Yeah, I just want to ask, can we get any more definitive timing on the health inequality expected start and review?
I think it's very clear to say that we need to move on with this as soon as possible, assuming that we don't hit any snags, unexpected snags with the waste review, and we are able to more or less finish that subject to the discussion this evening. I would hope that we would move to target that for an immediate discussion at the earliest available opportunity. Unless I see any disagreement. Councillor Blackmore.
On page 25, we've got the expected start date for the annual scrutiny report as December 24. And it says timetable draft January 23 and final February 23. I wonder if it should be the other way around. So we're starting at December 23 and then the draft for January 24. And
I suspect that it is that way round, yes. Otherwise, we'd need a TARDIS. Okay, any other comments on that, on the committee work programme? No, in that case, I move the work programme be noted with that additional note about the health inequalities review. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. Move on to item 14, Environmental and Waste Crime Enforcement Review. I turn briefly to the clerk to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. So, in moving towards concluding the Environmental and Waste Crime Review, the suggestions that have been made by the committee across the past 2 meetings have been collated into draft recommendations with intended outcomes, and these are shown in Appendix 1 to the briefing note. The committee is asked to consider those recommendations and make any changes as necessary before agreeing the recommendations, and then Democratic Services will use that to produce a formal report on the committee's behalf for it to consider at the next meeting for formal agreement. I'm happy to answer any questions on the process involved. Thank you.
Any immediate comments or questions? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Olivia, and thank you, Chairman. So, beginning with the list on 27 and 28, thank you very much for the collated list to all officers, Olivia and everybody else that's contributed to teasing out those points and collating them in a very tidy and constructive fashion. Thank you for that. I'm looking at item 8 on page 28. I understand the point about liaison with Medway Council. I wonder whether it should be slightly altered to begin with liaison with litter picking groups in Maidstone Borough and include liaison with Medway Council. I've forgotten precisely why we made a point of talking about Medway Council, but surely it should be at least both in that item. And perhaps the same liaison should also occur in item 9. Perhaps we should also be liaising with county council councillors as well. These are just procedural issues. The points are clear, and I'm in support of all of the items that are written down here. I think they're nicely put. Thank you.
Councillor Blackmore, are you indicating? Sorry. Okay. I did receive a note in relation, which I'm going to ask you to comment on in a minute, Councillor Thompson, but did you have any immediate comment on that comment?
If I can just seek a point of clarification, if that's all right, Councillor. In terms of, will you talk about recommendation 9 and adding that so that Medway Council be asked to share information and approach Kent County Council for the same thing? Just make sure I've understood correctly.
I began by speaking about 8 and then moved on to 9, and I'm guessing that actually both links should apply. Yes.
I see that would be a problem necessarily. Councillor Webb.
Yes, if we're discussing, not just discussing it, but I'd like clarification on exactly what the stance of Maidstone Borough Council is on litter picking, voluntary litter picking, because I've had conflicts of information in terms of who can, who can't, where they can and where they can't, and whether they're covered on any insurance policy. Thank you.
Councillor Round, did you want to come in before I reply?
I just wanted to, I mean, the member in asking the question has saw some clarification, and maybe we're all looking for some form of clarification, but one of the other things I understood, not just in working with Medway Council, is that those wards, particularly on periphery areas of the borough, whilst we may have what can only be described as a fairly good service in many, many respects, it's actually easier, particularly when you're doing voluntary litter collections, certainly in my own ward, to actually take it to a dump that's actually outside of the borough. It's actually a lot nearer for us in Headcorn to dump our rubbish at the Ashford or even the Sittingbourne waste tip than take it all the way to Allington. And I think that was where some clarification was needed as to whether there was some flexibility in using various collection and dumping points. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, and I know that those problems that do exist in the Medway area, that they're literally 2 miles away from somewhere where they could actually leave the rubbish, and yet they're not allowed to do so.
Thank you, that's useful. I'll come back to the original point in a minute. In terms of the situation with voluntary groups, there are a lot of voluntary groups that do litter picking in Maidstone, everything from the relatively organised groups like Bredhurst and the group that does them in Detling, and down to various councillors, such as the councillors for the current East Ward and North Ward going out and doing it themselves with various residents. By and large, the borough council has encouraged and supported those by normally arranging, by often arranging equipment, such as litter pickers, green sacks or black sacks, and arranging pick-up points to collect those. So generally there shouldn't be any obstacle for that taking place, because it's happening across the borough on a regular basis. And if people are saying no, they're not going to support that, then we need to know about it, because that has been something that the council has been supporting for ages. I'll call Mr. Garton in a minute, he may have something to add for this, but I'm not aware of there being any officer or councillor pushback on this. However, I would say that those groups would not, in general, be covered by our council's insurance. They would be undertaking this on a purely voluntary basis, and any risks that they will be running, which would be fairly minimal, as we're really talking about. We're not talking about litter picking generally taking place along roads, main roads, which would be a very seriously bad idea. But we're talking about people mostly clearing up public open spaces of one sort or another, where the risk is relatively slight. But by and large, unless there's a particular arrangement with a parish council, and there are some groups that do it by arrangement by a parish council, in which case they would possibly be covered by their insurance, then they will be doing it at their own risk. Councillor Garton, you may want to add something.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, what you said is broadly correct. If I can elaborate a little bit with the experience from my own ward, which is a very rural ward, as everybody knows. Maidstone Borough Council is supportive of all litter picking groups. We happily supply black bags, picking tools and high-vis vests. The problem is when the litter picking takes place at roads with national speed limit, and that includes single carriageways in the rural areas. We do not condone litter picking on those roads. So getting back to my own ward, the community of Stockbury would like to do much further litter picking because the village of Stockbury is relatively small and relatively free of litter, but the problem is the little single carriageway roads in the Stockbury area. And basically from the environmental team we cannot supply the community with litter picking equipment to clear those roads outside the village envelopes. It's a liability question, and where the council insurance would come in. Yeah, that's basically it.
Thank you. That's glad to hear that that I was broadly correct. But as the question has been raised, and there is clearly some, informational deficit in certain areas, perhaps it would be wise to add some information add to the review of recommendation that the council clarify what support it will give litter pickers and when it is not going to give it, because of the issue with working on dangerous roads, so that people are aware of that and are encouraged to participate. Might be useful to actually clarify it, given that there is some doubt.
Chairman, for any voluntary group that does undertake litter picking, do they not carry out a risk assessment first? To work
They
out?
do generally. I was just thinking that this issue has come up before, and I've had people tell me that they've had a negative response from some council officers, not generally at a senior level, but relatively junior officers. So I think that we need to make it clear, both to the public and our own staff, what we are and aren't doing, because this has come up before in the past. I thought we'd got over it, but from Simon's question, it's clear we haven't. So going back to the original point on whether Kent County Council should be added to the information point on the fly tipping under points 8 and 9. Any comments on that? We're just adding. Did you need a clarification?
reference to Kent County Council as well as
Okay. Oh, we've got, if you wouldn't mind reading that out.
so just to clarify, what I've got down is that recommendation 8 would be amended to make reference to voluntary litter picking groups across Maidstone, in addition to contacting Medway Council, and that recommendation 9 be amended to include reference to Kent County Council as well as Medway Council.
Okay, that's a lot clearer. So, Councillor Thompson, you sent us an email earlier. Would you like to?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also in item 1, should we include not just Borough Insight magazine, the future of which is presently in jeopardy, I understand, but other means of communication? We don't mind how it is that residents find out about the Spotlight on the Waste Crime Team, by whichever means it might be it the Borough Insight magazine or whatever else. We need something else in there that says that if it isn't in that magazine, that it happens by some other means. So yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for assistance in distributing my email in paper. This is a draft for suggestion. In casting minds back to why we were interested in having this review on waste crime to begin with, I wonder whether or not the 10 items on pages 27 and 28 really encapsulate everything it was that we hoped would be achieved. And on consideration, I thought that we should consider the ongoing communication. So I've drafted some points for consideration. I think that generally outlines the kinds of constructive suggestions that it would be good for us as members to hear how the revamped, expanded and reinvigorated team is getting on. When the conversation began, I had absolutely no idea whether or not Jennifer Stevens and colleagues were overwhelmed with challenges with waste crime, whether they were on top of it, whether frustrations that residents expressed about fly tipping not being collected was a solvable problem or not. There was a lack of information and understanding and clarity about what had been going on, so I proposed this as a means of addressing that issue. So it is with a view to constructive communication with councillors, so that we're aware of what's going on in our ward areas, where it is we can assist, how we contribute information to that process to assist the service. I'm not trying to check up on anybody, and I hope that the member appreciates that. Just to facilitate good communication, and I welcome constructive comments in that regard. Thank you.
I could separate that into two parts, which I will in a moment, but first I'll take Councillor round.
Well, firstly, can I thank the member for going into such detail and analysis of what you feel is needed. I think, in fairness, with the cabinet member here, I don't think we should go into that many specifics, but I get where you're coming from, and I think at this stage, pardon me for being like taking the lead chair, but I think what we can really do at this meeting is ask the cabinet member to go away and see what sort of dashboard they can come up with, and leave it purely at that, because there will be operational considerations, finding out that data, managing it, etc. There'll be a bit of work involved, and I'm not trying to sort of belittle any of this content at all, but I think there's a bit of work to be done, and let's ask the cabinet member to go away and do it.
Thank you, Chairman. Referring to what Councillor Round has said, my concern is we start overloading officers with requests for information. Once we've got the information, what are we going to do with it? So I think we have to be quite careful as to what we're asking, because if you want this separated out across every single ward, this is quite a lot of officer time, and I have to say I would rather have them doing something more practical and more useful. I mean, I think we know the number of fly tipping incidents, for example, that happen. I think we know where fines have been issued, but I think we have to be really careful about requesting too much detail. And whilst I think this is laudable, I think it does need to be simplified, because to me, this just looks as if you want the information to stick on a leaflet for campaigning, dare I say.
I understand that quite a lot of this information does actually already exist. So to an extent, it would be pulling together information and probably just putting it in one place. So what I would personally prefer is that we do something very similar to what Councillor Round suggested, and which Olivia suggested before the meeting. Well, to myself and the Vice Chairman, is that we ask the officers to see how much of this could easily and practically be achieved without burdening them too much, and also ask them how that could be taken forward in a practical way to improve the service. So that's two questions. Can we do it? And if so, what would the merit, how useful would it be in terms of actual outcomes? So if members don't mind, I would be sort of minded to suggest we attach this as an addendum for our officers to look at, rather than a final recommendation.
There is another aspect, Chairman, which is I'm sure some of this is already captured by KPIs somewhere, but I'm not absolutely certain where. The Community and Housing Policy Advisory Committee, I'm sure there's a KPI which captures a lot of this information. Sorry, Key Performance Indicator. I do hate acronyms, apologies. Yeah, I think this is probably easier to do as a verbal report than actually someone having to sit down for hours and write it. But that's just opinion.
I was just suggesting that we refer this on to the Cabinet member and officers to see whether they thought it would be a useful approach, and yes. Going back to the original point, on point one, the issue about communications, as you rightly said, Councillor Thompson, part of this was not just was to make sure that we were putting out the relevant press releases to the conventional media, if you can call it that, and to social media. Whilst I'm sure that that was in the intention to include that in this, it's probably worth making it clearer that that is what we are talking about, and I suspect that would meet your objective. So if you wouldn't mind just making that clearer. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. It was on that very point of communication. I'm sorry, I didn't hear my colleague what he actually said about the next issue of the Borough Insight, because I understand that it is no longer going to be published. That's what my recollection of full council was. So if that is indeed the case, that it is not going to be published, I would urge that we could, I mean, this is an excellent article. In fact, it has been run in the Borough Insight magazine in previous issues, I seem to recall. I was lobbying to actually create a special election issue of the Borough Insight. So there is a need for this communication. And this is a classic example. The White Waste Crime Team, it's a classic example of why we still need to have paper through doors, because it is simply another way of communicating with people. I've still got my back copies. I'm such a sad person. There's so much information in there. So I'd like that point taken up, please, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Understanding, correct me if I'm wrong as a member of the Cabinet, is here, Councillor Garton. My understanding is that the option to publish special editions of the Insight is still available, but it's the regular publication, if you like, that is sort of ceased. So if a justification can be shown for publishing an edition on a particular subject, then the relevant budget could possibly be sourced from from whatever the relevant subject area is, which is what happened with the last one, I understand. If you wouldn't mind.
Yes, indeed, Mr. Chairman. I think it's all a question of finance and money at the moment, and we will all be in this chamber in a few weeks' time to discuss next year's budget. And if we can find money for publications, then we'll happily use it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Right, before we wrap up this report, any further suggestions, questions, amendments? Okay, thank you very much. In that case, is everyone clear what amendments we've made this evening? I think we are. In that case, I propose the amended report be agreed. Secondly, Councillor Webb. All those in favour? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We move on to what should be a relatively short agenda item, as we're not actually writing the thing now, I hope, which is the framework for the annual Overview and Scrutiny Committee report. As members will recall, we were under such pressure of time last year that we didn't really have a lot of time to reflect on the annual report. So it was very ably put together by Olivia. But what we have is a framework for a somewhat more considered approach. Not that there was anything wrong with your version, but a somewhat, shall we say, slower and more inclusive process. None of this will be written now, of course, but what we have before is a proposed framework. It's not very different than the framework that was used previously that Councillor Blackmore will probably remember. So, and if anyone wants to change it now, though, here is your opportunity. I'm not seeing anyone. Oh, Councillor Blackmore.
I think, to be fair, it does what it says on the tin, doesn't it? It includes all the bits that need to be included, and I can't really think of anything else that needs to be added. The only thing I would say is you might just want to have a short conclusion at the end, but other than that, I would say, yeah, I'm happy to move that.
Sorry, Chair, may I just add and support what Councillor Blackmore has said? I think this really is very concise and very helpful. Thank you very much. I would just urge that it doesn't quote too much from the whole year's work. There's a danger that you can start attaching appendices and examples of this, and before you know where you are, you've got a thick book, which ends up being a repetition of the whole year's work. So it would need to be a summary, succinct. I'm sure that's obvious to you, but I just thought I ought to put it out there. Thank you, Chair.
No, I think relatively short, hopefully well written. As Councillor Blackmore said, we might, depending on where we are at the end of the year, it might be worth adding 3 or 4 paragraphs at the end as almost a bridge to the coming year. But we shall see. But that will probably be a reasonable thing to do without, in any sense, being partisan. So, which is not the function of this committee. So, is that agreed? Thank you. May I, as the last act this evening, wish everyone a very, very happy festive season. Cabinet aren't quite there yet. You've got a meeting tomorrow, but hope that goes well, and that you all have a good time over the Christmas and New Year period, and that goes doubly for our members of staff. May I thank everyone for their contributions this calendar year. It has been much appreciated that by and large this has been a free and open flow of discussion without and questioning without too much political point scoring going on, and long may that continue. Thank you very much, and I close the meeting.